Okay, now we're on air now, so great to see everybody. This is an experiment, and we are just seeing how it goes. So this is a group of friends that I know. My name's Richard Lang, and I'll just start with an experiment very briefly, and then I think I'll just ask each person to briefly introduce themselves. So I'm Richard, and I'm going to invite you to be aware of your single eye. My hands disappear into this open space here. I'm looking out of nothing, vast openness. And I hope that you, the viewer, are also aware of this. I know all my friends are here. And the brilliant thing is, which is partly why we're doing this Hangout broadcast, is that each of us has a different response to this basic experience of who we really are. And the idea is just to share some of our responses. So I'm going to now invite us to introduce ourselves a little bit and just what brought us to seeing, or how we came to seeing, or something like that. So Susita, if you'd like to start. You have to turn your microphone on. You have to turn your microphone on.
Yes, can you hear me?
Now I can, yes.
Yeah. I'm Susita. I'm from Bangalore, India, and a few years back I was driven to learn meditation and to discover my true self, and I did a lot of reading and spiritual seeking, and then sometime this year I was looking for more ways of integrating the spiritual identity into my daily life. Because it was more like the meditations were very peaceful, but then when I would go back into the daily life activities, somewhere I found it was not integrated. So that's when I found the Headless Way, and I found it very effective because I could practice it when I'm with people, when I'm walking, basically any time. All I have to do is, just remember. And there are so many experiments, and so I started practicing that, and I really find it very deep and very helpful in remembering my true identity.
Brilliant, brilliant. It came in useful at the right time, I think.
Yes.
Okay, great. Welcome, Burma. We just started. We're on air. Sequoia, would you like to introduce yourself if you unmute your microphone there?
Yes, my name is Sequoia, and I found the Headless Way through Richard's interview on Buddha at the Gas Pump series, and I had been meditating off and on throughout my adult life, and had started a serious spiritual quest just recently, and asked for some guidance from my higher self, and was led to that interview, and it was the best thing I've ever done, I can say.
It led you to your higher self?
Yes, it did.
You did the pointing experiment, I guess.
Yes, I did. The one that spoke to me the most in that moment was the eyes closed experiment, and right. So there was a significant shift at that moment in time in my life.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sequoia. Sam, you have to unmute. That's it.
Yep. So, look, I've been interested in what you could call the depth dimension of life from probably my late teens when I experimented with LSD after being very much a positivist materialist and not interested in any of that stuff. I suddenly saw this opening into a kind of depth, and I became interested in that. It sort of became my life's focus, I guess, and I began searching, and I tried Vipassana meditation. I joined a cult, and I had help from many great authors and teachers and so on. Then one day in 2005, I went to a workshop with Richard here in Perth, and the the insight that had been eluding me through all this process, the very simple coming to, as it were, occurred as a result of doing the first experiment he showed us. And I've never really looked back from that. I think it was a shift that stage shifted in many ways. I mean, I don't always notice it, but it's always there when I look. The absence of any entity here at the center of where all my experiences are landing. And this is wonderful. This has been a continually unfolding delight and joy and resource and practical help in my life.
Brilliant. And Sam and I are a very good friend, and his wife Navi. You are so instrumental in making the website so brilliant and publishing books and stuff. So, and Sam is in Australia, Sequoia is on the Oregon coast, and Susita's in Bangalore, I think, in India. All right, so Doug, how about you introducing yourself?
Hi, I'm Doug. I live in Fort Collins, Colorado. My first exposure to the Headless Way per se was through Catherine Harding. She did a series of interviews on the Urban Guru Cafe, and I think those are available on your website at some place, Richard, as well as on the Urban Guru Cafe. Really quite compelling. I remember very, very clearly, and I think this was about 2009. That first experience.
Good. Okay, keep going. We lost you for a minute, but you're back.
Okay. And like many of the others, I had a meditation practice in different forms for many years. Probably most notably a Vipassana practice, which is quite experiential, as the Headless Way is as well. But I think what the Headless Way in particular gave me is a series of methods to engage that in daily life, ordinary experience. Sushita used the term integrated, right? To really kind of bridge the gap between a practice separate from my daily life and then a practice that really was fully integrated in all aspects of that. And I think it's a great tool for that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Doug. Thank you. And I'm going to go to Burma now. If you unmute your mic and just introduce yourself, Burma.
Hi, my name is Burma. I live in central Vermont, and I came to the Headless Way, I think, through Never Not Here, Richard Miller. And then I watched an interview on Conscious TV, and what I love about this method is that it's not intellectual, and it's very direct, and it doesn't require any kind of background, any special background. You don't have to have done any practices of any sort to have an immediate experience, and it's wordless. There are no words in it, there's no concepts in it, it's just very immediate. And I think that the experiences through the experiments are the most profound and direct way to understand what we're talking about.
Thank you. Thank you, Burma. Well, brilliant. So, I mean, if you're viewing this and you haven't done the experiments, there's lots on the website, and I encourage you to do that. The simplest thing is to notice you can't see your own face now. Instead of my face, I see the screen and the rest of the room. And the other thing is that being empty here is being silent, and so I find many voices within this one silence. And this now includes Burma and Sam and Sequoia and Susita and Doug. So we're going to enjoy being the one with many voices. So this is unscripted, as I say, but any reflections that anyone wants to share at the moment about this?
Well, I have a question, I guess. While the void is never changing, our experiences of it are, and they're often very different. And I wanted to know how others, how the experience is different for them when they choose to do an experiment, and when the void is just visited upon them.
Okay, thank you, Sequoia. Any initial thoughts about that? I think for me, the wonderful thing is that I've got the experience, which is non-verbal, as Burma, I think, was saying. I can't see my head, instead I see the world. I don't hear my ears, instead I hear voices. I hear voices, sounds. And then from there, as I kind of stay with this experience and bring my attention to it, like I'm doing now, which is one of the reasons I come on the Hangout, is to remind myself, be aware of this basic experience, then my reflections and responses to it evolve. And I think, like all of us here, as I stay with it, these responses and experiences go deeper and deeper and deeper. And so that's my initial reflection. Someone else?
Yeah, for me, if I intentionally want to have a seeing experience, it's sort of like climbing up a ladder and stepping out on the high plank over the swimming pool and deliberately making the effort and choosing to take the steps to get to the point where I jump off and I'm in free fall. And the experience of free fall is the same experience that comes upon me visiting uninvited. And so the experience is the same, but the intention is much more direct when I am deliberately choosing. It appears as though I'm deliberately choosing it as opposed to not choosing it. But it's always profound and wordless.
Great, thank you.
Yes, the interesting thing about this way that we found is that it's the only method I've come across where I can notice my void nature at will. I can actually, it's never not available. That's quite astonishing. I've used other methods before, and they would afford me glimpses, and they would kind of make me more prone to having these experiences, perhaps. But there was always this sense that it was hit and miss. But with this, I find just not noticing the absence of a head, say, or the absence of any kind of obstruction here between me and the world, immediately makes this openness, this boundless openness available, and it seems to be that way no matter what mood I'm in or what experience I'm having. It doesn't seem to. There's no kind of circumstance. It's opaque to this accessibility, if you like. I find this astonishing, and so in answer to your question, the more I sort of consciously enjoy this and look for it or look to it, the more I find I'm also spontaneously overtaken by it in various situations in my life. It's as if it's meeting me halfway. It's very hard to explain. And the other thing is, that in the seeing of it, of course, it's not clear whose decision that is it?
Good point. Wonderful, wonderful. Anyone else feel like responding to that?
I think one of the reasons that it's as effective both as a meditation technique where one might deliberately create experiences of expansion or experiences of heightened awareness of your environment and so forth, is that almost all of the experiments, and I think all of them actually, have a somatic element associated with them. You're moving your body, and when I do that, I think it involves, my entire nervous system is engaging that process when my body is engaged in it just as much as my other faculties might.
Yes. Thank you, Doug. Yes. You come and go a little bit, but we got that. Yes, Sam, go on.
I was just going to say, I think that's very true. That somatic or physical aspect of it is so important. I mean, I was looking at a talk today. I went to visit with some friends who from the remnants of Pete and Pearl's awareness group still meet. Richard, they still get together and watch sort of videos, and we went along for the first time in a long time. It was great to catch up with them. We watched a talk by Shanti, and it was great. I mean, he's a very wonderful chap. But he was talking about the end of wanting and how you develop this theme about one of the aspects of the human condition is that we always want something to be different, and which is true. I mean, we can notice that about being human. And that usually we go from wanting something to the object of the wanting, and we don't stay with the feeling of wanting. And his whole thesis was that if we stay with the feeling of wanting, after a while it will disappear and we'll be free of it, right? Which is, I think, we've probably all had experiences of that. But what struck me immediately about this was how subtle the thing he was talking about is, how difficult it was to discern in oneself, and how much the effort involved in doing it, the difficulty of it, and also the ease with which you could misunderstand what he was saying. And generally the whole thing was, he was talking about said some wonderful things, like you've got to go on your own experience, and this thing that I'm telling you about is no big deal, but it's very, very important. All of the things he was saying could have applied to our experience of headlessness, actually. It was very interesting. But he was talking about this other thing, which is noticing when you want something and noticing the mechanism of desire, which is wonderful stuff. But I was just thinking how much easier it is just to notice the physical aspect. I mean, he was talking about something very psychological in a way, and so many of these teachers do. They address these deep psychological problems, and they address them with words in such a way that it's almost impossible to get what they're talking about unless you already know what they're talking about. Whereas this method is somatic in the sense that you really do experience it with your body and your senses and your perception very, very immediately. And I find that very, very amazing and wonderful.
In fact, there's no other choice, really, is there? I mean, you point.
Yes, you have to kind of notice it. Or, I mean, if you're being serious, you have to notice the absence of anything at this end of the perceptual apparatus. It's kind of the elephant in the room. And once you notice the void at your end of the tunnel, it's inescapable. And I think that another interesting question is what makes people ready to notice that? Because many people aren't, or if they do notice it, they bounce off the experience and change the subject. But I think for those of us who are ready to notice it, the experiments are by far the most humane and direct and easy way of doing it.
I've been thinking. Oh, sorry. Go on.
I just was going to interject that I like the word humane because all of the other techniques can be quite torturous at times.
Yes, yes. I the way I think about it is that the experience is so immediate, so physical, so somatic, you can't not get it. I mean, how can you not be ready to notice you can't see your own face? But you might not be ready, and you might not be interested in it. You might not be ready to make connections with it. But I mean, there's no question that everyone can't see their own face. So then it's a matter of, does that mean anything to you? And how does that go down with you, as it were? And obviously, we who are meeting here in this hangout, we find it of deep significance and great practical value. But we're not seeing it any more clearly than the person who says that's rubbish. We've just got a different reaction, which is very egalitarian and feels right.
Wait, you say it feels right. For me, when I am just the open space, I don't know if I'm feeling anything. I don't know where I'm feeling anything. I could be feeling something, but on the whole, it's so vast and empty and freeing. It's like nothing you can conjure up through thinking about it. And so there's this experience of no things happening. It's hard to explain.
I
like
think
yesterday,
you're explaining it well.
I was in the car, and I realized that everything that I've ever wanted in my life was happening right in that moment. That it was just like the perfect moment. And it just occurred to me that this, they've always said this is it, and what is it? But, I was it and it was me, and there was no separation, and everything was coming together exactly perfect, if there's such a thing as perfection. And I thought, wow, I wouldn't want to change a hair, not a speck of how everything was in that moment. And it just came, and it didn't go away. It was like, wow, this is happening. The thoughts came in to interpret the amazing experience, but the experience was so pure. I can't really say that it had any feelings or emotions, or it was after the experience that thoughts came in.
Yes, I'm going to jump in there. I think another thing I love about the headless experience is I don't have to think about it. And sometimes I'm just enjoying it, and it means nothing. And what a relief not to have it mean anything.
Yes, it's very interesting, isn't it? Why do things need to mean something? I mean, why does something need to mean something else other than what it is? I mean, life, to say what is the meaning of life, assumes that life on its own is no good without having a meaning from somewhere else. It's an interesting idea. It kind of is crazy. It's a kind of madness, I think. I mean, when you see this, as Burma described it, this wonderful, vast space, it needs no justification. It needs no outside or any kind of, it needs nothing added to it. It gives meaning to everything, not the other way around. Very interesting. And yet, while we search for meaning, we ignore it, don't we, in a way? I mean, the search for meaning pushes aside the ordinary. It's looking for something extraordinary, something valedictory, something that's going to pour into us somehow and make us, redeem us. And yet the very thing that is actually already doing that, we kind of ignore in that search. It's very ironic. It's amazing.
Yes.
and also many of the things that we've been reading over the years, like oneness, unconditional love. I think all of the experiments point to the highest spiritual truths. Like I feel each of those experiments point to that, like the paper bag and unconditional love, just acceptance of the other person. And it's a direct experience. It's not like I have to accept this person. It just feels like you have already accepted when you do the experiment. It's just there.
Yes.
I think that's what makes the experiments that Douglas Harding created are so simple, and yet because of all of our conditionings with concepts and words that have meaning, and so you point here and there's nothing there, but everyone knows there's a nose and eyes and a mouth, and you're breathing and you're hearing and you can taste and all of this stuff. And so the challenge is to let go of everything that you've ever been told and just see what happens. And I think that it's so hard sometimes for people, including myself, to really let go of all of that preconditionings and conceptual definitions and just see what happens.
Yeah, and working the other side of the street a little bit, I think this process is enormously personal, and enormously connected to self-empowerment on an individual and a personal level. So on one side of the process is the return to the source, if you will, and returning from a world of abstraction where we think we know who we are and we're told who we are and we're told how we should act, to discovering both our personal, individual, and beyond individual, source of ourselves. But then it comes back. It's totally personal. There's nothing about doing this experiment that isn't completely personal and completely individual. And then the expression of that, in our lives. And one of the things going on in the Facebook discussions with that Sam's involved with is this question of, are we escaping something through the process of abiding in the source or staying in that space? And I think that's impossible. I think eventually that's going to pour back out into a absolutely personal expression, through each one of us in a very different way. But it's a personal thing.
Yes, that's beautiful, Doug. Thank you. Again, that's something I love about Headless Way, is that it gives me a deep appreciation of our individuality, and that it doesn't deny the reality and value and preciousness of our individual selves. And I recognize that the one here is expressing itself as Richard, and therefore I recognize that the ones over there that I can see on the screen are the same one expressing itself in these different ways. And so now I am aware of this beautiful mystery, that the one is many and the many are one. And awakening to being the one empowers, as you say, Doug, it empowers the little one in a genuine, beautiful way. And you have a deep sense now that whoever you meet is the one in disguise, as it were.
Well, and it's happening here in community as well, right? We wouldn't be sharing what we're sharing unless we were all here.
That's true. Yeah. Yes. when I first was shown this by Richard, he began the back in 2005. I don't even remember this, Richard. You began the demonstration by saying, "This is about you personally sitting there in your chair." And I was very struck by this because the other teachers that I'd been exposed to up until then, nearly all of them, had kind of given lip service to the idea of individuality, but given the impression that it was some kind of obstacle, and that the way was somehow around, or transcend. You had to transcend that. And Richard was talking about, this is about you personally, and not you, some higher self you, or some abstracted self of the universe you, but you, the one sitting on the chair there. And that's what's wonderful about this, and what enables the empowerment that Doug's talking about, is that because it doesn't demonize the one you appear as, it allows that one to actually have a better life. Although that's a kind of side effect in a way. It's it's as if by removing this tremendous burden of selfhood from the one we appear as, he can suddenly start to flower. He or she can suddenly start to flower, free of this false pressure of selfhood. And I find that has been an unfolding joy for me personally, is to watch the way this little one, kind of blooms once that terrible confusion is cleared up. Even though initially the confusion is only cleared up in little bursts, and it's not a once and for all experience, but it's a beginning of a clearing up of a kind of deadly confusion, and it just, as Richard was saying, it deepens the experience. The ramifications of it keep getting deeper and more wonderful, and I find that astonishing and an occasion for great gratitude.
Yes, and this gesture... Sorry, go on, Burma, yes.
Oh, I was going to say, I don't get any sense of spiritual bypassing at all with this process. I don't think people are hiding behind a concept of being space or being open. I think it's so... Whatever is going on is so obvious and present. There's no attempt to hide from it, and the idea that you can run away from your own challenges, whatever they may be, doesn't happen. I think what you have is a GPS, so to speak, of how to get to being open and being space, and it's with you all the time. There's no end of the rainbow, perfect, happily forever after thing that's going to happen, because we're in process all the time. Nothing stays the same, and yet this GPS is always available at any time for you to actually locate yourself, not your individual physical self, but to locate the self, and it's always there.
Yes, and this gesture, the two-way thing, locates your boundless self here and your limited self there. And this placing of yourself, seeing that the center is uncluttered, therefore you can live from this uncluttered space as the individual, that you are somewhere there. And how wonderful to have both and not to have to choose. I think this is a deep thing, because we all know the kind of spiritual teaching that indicates that you've got to somehow clean up your act and get rid of your shadow and pull your socks up and all of that. And it may be that the teaching themselves are not really saying that, but we misinterpret them. So, whatever. And you try it for a while, and you have little successes, but I find, and I think looking at all my friends, I think they found too, that they fail. Somewhere along the line, you just can't maintain this kind of perfect person if ever you reach there. And the Headless Way says that's to be expected. What did you expect of that little one in the mirror? What did you expect of Richard? He's just human. Here's the perfection, and here's this beautiful, imperfect, temporary, precious expression. And that really is about forgiveness, isn't it? And you forgive not just yourself, but everyone else, really.
That was beautiful, Richard. Thank you.
It's rather fun to meet together and share like this, isn't it?
Oh, it's tremendous.
I think it's very essential to have these meetings, Richard. It has helped so much to have a community and do the same together. And when I shared it with a group of people some time back, I felt the experience deepened, sharing it with other people.
Yes.
Well, as Richard's often pointed out, it was our socialization which, in a way, estranged us from our depth experience, our experience of our deeper identity. We kind of learning to play what we call the face game, which is a human social necessity, is the process by which we kind of lose touch or forget this other aspect of ourselves. And so there is a social aspect to regaining it, and I think that's very, very precious and important. And the thing that I love about the Headless Way is it makes this social aspect much more available than approaches which are sort of based around the personality of a teacher, because the teacher remains in a sense inaccessible. He remains on a pedestal. It doesn't matter how much he might personally want to resist that, but the very setup of satsang of the teacher and the disciples creates this dynamic and this theatre which makes it very difficult. And of course, the people around him are a peer group, but they're a peer group of seekers. And of course, as soon as one of them gets enlightened, he goes off and becomes a teacher. So there's a sense in which all of the enlightened people are by themselves, in a certain sense. I mean, they do get together these days more than they used to, but there's a sense in which, it's a solitary experience being enlightened or being awake. And yet we can experience it as being a normal aspect of human adult development. Nothing special. We realize that we've actually, it doesn't convey any privileges or any special status on us. We are just like this. Everyone's like this. And we just happen to be lucky enough to have noticed the fact and to be able to share that noticing with each other. And that, I think that's tremendously, it brings a quality of sanity and normality to what I think is just a normal stage of human development that we seem to have got, as a species, could have locked ourselves out of temporarily because of some glitch in the culture or something, I don't know. But this, I mean, the fact that we can have this conversation now and we can understand each other so perfectly, it shows that there's hope for everybody, I think.
Yes, this social aspect is so interesting. The way that we infect each other with our state of consciousness. So you were referring to the 4 stages. So stage 1, the baby is saying to everyone, be open like me. Come and join me in this unself-conscious openness. And the child is saying, well, I'm I'm still in touch with that, but I'm exploring being in different boxes. Come and play with me and be a lion or a tiger, or, you know, just make things up as you go along. And then the third stage of the adult is I'm in a box, you're in a box. That's all there is to it, mate. And this is non-verbal as much as verbal, in the sense that I just have to look at you and you feel looked at, and I kind of non-verbally place you in a box and you place me in a box. So mainly it's non-verbal. And then when you're seeing, of course you still do that, you still feel looked at and you still look at people and they feel looked at. But now you're conscious of this openness, like the baby, you're also broadcasting and saying to everyone, you can be both. And I was with this friend a couple of days ago. I'd never met him before, and he was interested in seeing, so we met up in central London for lunch. It was great fun. And a young guy. And anyway, we were in the restaurant, and I was telling him about this, and I was saying, you know, right now, you're wide open for the whole restaurant, and you can't help but broadcast to everybody, can transmit to everyone here this basic openness, whether they like it or not. You're doing this, you see. And then I did this thing. I said, oh, you've heard of transmission, haven't you? He's a Buddhist. And the idea of transmission is, you know, the guru transmits the truth to the disciple. And it's mainly non-verbal, I think, you know, darshan or something. And so I, you know, joking but serious, I looked at him and I said, look, you know, this wide open emptiness there where you are, you're single eye, you're built open, you're busted wide open for the whole restaurant now, and all the voices are in you, and you're just wide open, and don't you feel absolutely seen as who you are? You see, and he was going like this. He says, yes. And you see, the thing is, this is not a thing that a special guru only can do. You and I can, we're doing this all the time. You know, that's the beauty of this simple gaze. It's uncontainable. So that's one of the beauties of meeting together, isn't it? Sorry, Sam, I'll just finish. In these groups, what's going on is we're both giving each other feedback, you know, verbally and non-verbally, about our individual selves. But we're also kind of got on the front burner this one space in which this whole meeting is happening, which is brilliant. Go on, Sam.
I was just going to say that I've just been at a party with some friends, some of whom I knew had met before, but most of whom I only knew slightly or not at all. And since being into seeing, I've really started to enjoy people without any kind of precondition. So, and I've been amazed at the way that you can meet someone who you can kind of immediately meet them somewhere from this space, and there's this kind of amazing connection, whether or not they're, you know, I mean, not even talking about seeing. You can be talking about. I was talking about. You find a topic that you're both interested in. Suddenly, there's this flow of meaning and understanding between two human beings, and it's so precious and so wonderful. And the way that people just melt and open when you are transmitting from this place is just priceless. It's wonderful. It's one of the great kind of downstream effects of seeing, and one that I really, really enjoy.
Actually, on two occasions, one quite recent and one just a little bit ago, that just come to mind. There I am walking through a square somewhere in another country, actually. I can't remember where it was, Spain, I think. And a few days ago, I was in Greenwich with friends. And I look up, you see, and there's someone who just beams at me, smile as wide as the sky, you know, and I'm thinking, wow. And I don't know what, you know, I look like, but I'm kind of enjoying being the world, you know. And suddenly I look up and someone, I guess, I can only think, you know, because we don't talk, they just pass, you know, but, or I live in an Orthodox Jewish area. I was walking down the street a few months ago, and there's a gaggle of old, bearded men with hats on, you know, very serious. And I'm walking down, and I just look at one of them. as I'm walking by, I just look. I no particular feeling or thought, and he just smiles. It's beautiful, beautiful.
You wonder when that happens if the other person is aware of the same experience at the same time or not. It almost seems like they have to be, but
yes, who knows? Who cares, really? Yeah. And it's just brilliant with children. I mean, I imagine you all have experienced this. You're headless with children, and they love it. I mean, you somehow got a secret going. I don't know how to explain it, but it's just like you get on like a house on fire because you're a kid with them. You're not looking down from an adult kind of tower. Famous last words.
William Samuel refers to this adult experience you're talking about as the time of adultery.
Oh. Very good. Very good.
Well, you mentioned children, Richard, and it's interesting when you look at a baby, you can see that, or a very young child, that you can tell that they're the void that has been dropped into a physical body, and they're trying to figure out how to manipulate this body. It's like, how did I get here? What am I doing? And so I think that's the process of childhood, is teaching them how to manipulate this body and the external world when they're the void in their spirit that has just been dropped into it.
Yes, and like Sam was indicating with the 4 stages, that headlessness is the natural 4th stage. It's not a weird kind of thing that bounces you out the whole story. It's the natural. In fact, it's the maturing of our personality. It's the natural flowering. It's not a kind of strange, thing that happens to a few people that drops you out of the whole story. It drops you deeper in. It's what the story is about, really, in a way.
Yeah, I look at children and adults who can be unrehearsed. In other words, their actions are improvised, they're improvisational, spontaneous. That's always the most delightful way to be with anyone, including myself, and I particularly comes out when spontaneous and so hilarious, and it just touches something that's immediately recognized as a kind of a oneness connection, and yeah, I find that to be quite beautiful and mindless.
Yes. You've got a headless cat there, Sam. You've muted your mic, so we can't hear you.
This is Earl Grey, who's a lovely creature, and earlier in the afternoon we got back from this meeting we'd been to, and there was a little gap in the action, so I decided to take a nap. And Merle was in the mood for a bit of a cuddle, and she gets a bit boisterous. She headbutts you and so on. So eventually I held her paw. I took one of her paws and held it, and immediately she relaxed. And I woke up half an hour later, and we were both sleeping together, and I was still holding her paw. But cats are amazing. They love it when you're seeing this. They somehow they start. As soon as I see this, they'll start purring. It's very interesting.
Did you say the cat's name was Earl Grey?
Merle Grey, yes.
Oh, I thought you said Earl Grey, like the Earl of
Yeah,
Grey.
well, it's a play on Earl Grey, but her name is Merle and she's grey, so we call her Merle Grey.
Oh, sweet. Yeah.
I have the feeling that when I'm with animals, you know, they say that animals can really sense your mood and pick up on those kinds of things. And they're very physical, obviously. And I have the feeling, because seeing means that you're, in terms of my body sensations, I have this feeling that my body sensations are at large. I merge with the world. And this is a very kind of lovely, warm kind of feeling of merging physically with the environment. And when I'm with birds, or in the garden, or squirrels, or dogs, or cats, I have the feeling that they probably pick up on this. That I'm at large, because they're at large, and if you're at large, you sense the world a lot better probably than if you're kind of not consciously that way. So I think animals respond to this as well. And when you touch an animal, if you're not, if your sensations, you kind of merge with the cat. There's no boundary, and I can't imagine they don't sense that.
I think they're probably quite relieved when we stop talking and chattering and going on about whatever we're going on about.
When we stop our adultery.
Exactly.
Yes, I notice with my dog when she gets very comfortable, she has this deep breath. It's very deep. It's distinct from her more shallow breathing, and it's just like a sigh of letting go. And then I know that she has fully surrendered, or whatever. Those are just concepts that I'm making up, but I can feel the difference. Also with myself, when I am fully relaxed, I can tell with my breathing that it's much deeper. I'm not trying to hold on to anything or convey, or I don't know, just try. I'm not trying. That's the word I want to say. I'm not trying.
Yes, I think it's interesting you talk about that, because we're just about to do an online course on head off stress, and this is a very practical book. And you tense your hand, and you notice your hand is tense, but the space isn't tense. And here's the stress-free space in which stress comes and goes. And does it make a difference to be aware of this stress-free space when you are experiencing challenging situations and tension and stress? Well, it really does. It in practice, this leads to this deep letting go downstream, more or less, which is, well, try it and find out, but there it is. Yeah, wonderful. We're going to finish in a few moments. Really delightful for this first Hangout on air to hang out together. And any final thoughts about being together here and before I stop the broadcast?
Well,
it's always...
Go ahead, Burma. Go ahead, Burma.
Oh, no, I was just going to say quickly that it's always different every time we get together. It's never the same twice, and even if we say similar things, my experience is that it's always different, and it's very nourishing and very supportive, and I appreciate it.
Lovely. Sam, any thoughts before we go?
What Burma said.
Sequoia?
What Burma said.
Oh, right.
We are in one space.
What about you, Susita? You've got to be different.
I just want to say that this has really helped me, and it's not just about the state where there's peace. I think even when I've been in the middle of challenges, when I feel like a problem is overwhelming, I can use any of the experiments and say, you know, this space, is it disturbed? Is it afraid? Is it apprehensive? So I find it like very practical in deepening the meditation, but it has also helped me overcome the stress and the emotions that come up, you know, from time to time.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Doug?
A pleasure to be with you all again.
And you, Doug. Lovely to see you again, mate.
Very good. Well, lovely to be together. Hope if you're watching this, you've enjoyed being the space in which it happens, and I hope you can join us in a hangout. So, great. We will do this again. Bye for now.
All right, guys. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks very much. Bye.